everyone, it's Sean. I'm here to show you a really cool 3D type demonstration. I'm going to show you guys how to create this 3D type word Squamish in Illustrator. I was inspired to create this by seeing a bit of graffiti on Instagram, and I was wondering if there was a way that I could create it in Illustrator in a way that allows the type to be perfectly customizable every single time. You could go in and redo or retype this type in a mazillion different ways if you wanted to, and it'll apply the same layer effects every single time. So to get into this, what we're gonna have to do, I'm just gonna keep undoing my funny sort of joke there, is to create a new document. What I want to do is hit new, create new document. I'm just gonna go with a 4x6 RGB color document. Cool. And if you guys want to bring in the piece of graffiti artwork that I had in your week 5 folders, there is an asset 1. This is the piece of graffiti. You can just hit Shift Command P to place it in and click and drag it into your document. When you bring it in, let's go to the layers panel, call this one reference, and we can just lock it and create a new layer. We'll call this one background, and we'll create one more layer. We'll call this one type demo. Cool. So let's get to work on the background first. And what I want to do is I want to create a rectangle. I don't want it to have a stroke, and ideally I want this to be a gradient. But before we jump into just creating the gradient, what I want to do is I want to open up my swatches panel, and I want to start creating some new swatches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this is a global color, and I'm going to call this dark blue. And we're going to try and make a dark blue color. Something that feels sort of like this dark rich blue up in here. Somewhere, yeah, something like in that. Hit OK, and you'll see it created a color swatch there. I want to create a new group and call this background, and it should zip right in there if you had it selected when you created it. So I'm going to create another new swatch, and this time I'm going to call it mid blue. And we're going to work on creating a new sort of mid tealish bluish color. If you guys find it easier, you can use the color picker and just drag colors directly out of the swatch itself, or out of the reference image yourself, and then go in and just adjust them slightly like so, and then drag it down into your background color library. The only thing that you want to make sure is that all the colors we're creating are global colors, and that's just so we can easily go back and adjust them later on. And then finally, I really want a nice bright teal blue, so we'll call this bright blue. There we go. It's a global color. We'll hit OK and make sure it gets dragged on down into our background folder. Sweet. So for the background, we can select our rectangle, come over here and make it a gradient fill, and we can double click on this white color and we can set it to our dark shade. We can come over here, select this to our light teal shade, and click in the middle and create sort of our mid blue. And it's not actually really dark enough for me, so I can go back up into our swatches panel, double click on this, and really sort of deepen it up a little bit more. Something like that. Yeah, that looks nice. And if we go and apply our gradient one more time, now I just clicked over here underneath stroke and fill and applied the gradient. We have a nice looking sort of gradient. I'm going to make this a radial gradient instead, and what I would like to do is actually flip my teal highlight for my dark color so that it's on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Alternately, you could just hit reverse gradient up here and it will reverse things pretty nicely. I'm going to hit G on the keyboard, and I'm going to come up near the top and I'm going to draw out from the center, I'm going to draw out from the center a new gradient path. And I'm just going to sort of bring this higher up so that our highlight is sort of coming down from the top. And then what I would like to do again actually is come to our swatches panel, not be selected on anything, click on our darkest color and make it a little bit more dark and maybe a little bit more muted. And just kind of keep going about it. And that should update our gradients. It's still a little bit too bright for my taste, so I'm going to keep muting it a little bit more and making it a little bit more dark. Okay. And that looks nicer. We can live with that for now. No more fussing with the background. I'll leave that for you guys for later. I'm going to go into our layers panel and I'm going to lock it. And now I can really start working on our typography. So what I want to do is press T on the keyboard to bring up the type tool. And I just want to choose a sans serif typeface from my library. I'm going to go with Century Gothic Pro Bold. And we can just type in Squamish. There we go. I'm going to use 70-point type for this. Seems to work pretty well. And I'm just going to make sure it's aligned center to the middle of our page by using our align tools up here. And now begins the interesting work. We have to turn this black piece of type into this super dynamic, fun, awesome 3D thing. And to do that, we're going to use the appearance panel. If your appearance panel isn't open, you can go to Window, Appearance, and it'll open for you. Mine, I actually just closed it. 1 second. Appearance, boom. It might be open on the side. If it is, cool. I just dragged mine out and off to the side so it's easily accessible. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new fill. This fill I actually want to create a new color swatch for. So I can select new swatch. We'll call this peach. And we're trying to hit this sort of middle peach here. So let's sort of start to get to work on creating that peachish color. There we go. I'm fairly happy with that. I'm going to check global, so I want that to be on for sure. And I'm going to hit OK. And I can come down here. I can actually create a new group. I'm going to call this type. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to delete this black type because it definitely doesn't need to be there. And I'm going to make sure that we're filling it with our peach global color. So now within the appearance panel, you see we have a fill and we have the option to add a stroke. So I am going to add a stroke to this. We need it to be a 1-point stroke, I believe. Or actually, let's go with 3. And I want this to be white. So that's a pretty beefy stroke we got going on there. We might need to increase the type size of this from 70 up to 80 now that I think about it. Cool. And let's just center it one more time. So one of the first things that I want to show you guys in the appearance panel is the ability to apply effects. Applying effects is incredibly useful because it allows you to use everything that would be up in this effect menu, but apply it to specific characteristics within the appearance of a single object. So if I turned off our stroke for a second and I came down to fill, and if yours doesn't have this extra opacity option, all you do is have to click this down arrow. And let's say I wanted to add a stroke, but in a slightly different way. What I could do is click on this effects button down here and go to path, offset path, and I could create, whoops, come on. You could sort of actually beef this up a little bit, and it could create some really cool things. So to sort of show you what I mean, I'll duplicate the fill, and I'll come down here, and instead of peach, I'll use white. And now we're going to go to Effect, Path, Offset Path. There we go. Now I've made this sort of pseudo 0.05. I've made this sort of pseudo stroke. That's not really a stroke, but it looks like a stroke. But what it really is it's a fill that I'm telling to expand from the center out and sort of create an outline around our shape. I don't actually need that, so I'm just going to trash that layer, and I'm going to turn our stroke back on. But subsequently, what you can do is you can use path, offset path, and you can create, oh boy, you can create a negative offset. So we'll create a negative 0.25 pt for point path. Actually, we probably need that to be maybe a little bit bigger. Okay. I know it doesn't look like we did much. Hang on here. Why am I getting black under everything? If you're getting black like I was underneath everything, what you have to do is highlight the type and come over here and make sure it's filled with nothing. Okay? We want this to have no effects being applied to it except for what we have in the layers or in the appearance panel. So with this selected, we can put our stroke back on. And what I want to do is click on offset path again. And I want to kind of keep adding a bigger negative offset path. So let's do 0.01. Let's try 0.05. Okay, cool. 0.05 is quite a lot, but you can see that it starts to decrease the size of the fill of our original shape. And that's pretty important for the effects that we're trying to do. So let's do 0.3. And you can see we get this little bit of a gap between the stroke and our actual peach color. That's pretty important for what it is we're going to be trying to do. For now, I'm going to hit OK. And the next thing I want to do is underneath fill, if you just click on character, and we can add new fill, I want to create a new color swatch. So I'm going to hit new. It's going to be based off of our peach. This time I'm going to call it red shadow. And I want this to be a darker color than the peach. So we can sort of just take the green slider, shift it to the left a bit. We can take the red slider, shift it to the left a bit, the blue one a little bit, and we can hit OK. And we can drag this into type. And there we go. So right away, you can kind of see that because our peach type has a gap between it and the white stroke, if we add an extra fill, it fills that space with a shadow. And that's pretty cool, considering what we know about how things are sort of hitting the stack. But I want this to be even darker and a little bit more moody and shadowy. So I'm just going to keep sort of adjusting those colors there. That seems about okay. And based off how these things are hitting the stack, what you can see is the stroke is in front of or on top of everything. Then our peach color hits next, and our dark shadow fill color hits last. So what I want to do is come back up to this peach fill, and I want to add another effect. So this time I'm going to hit on the effects, and I'm going to go to distort and transform. And I'm going to click on transform, and what this allows me to do is this is going to allow me to shift the interior peach color, right, our base peach color, just a little bit. We're going to move it to the we're going to move it horizontally. Actually, we're going to move it -1 pt, and we're just going to get rid of the inches, and we're going to move this 1 pt. And now what you'll notice is I've shifted the peach. Here, let me turn off the stroke. I've shifted the peach just enough, right, that it is sitting underneath the stroke. The stroke is almost acting as a bit of a shield here. It's sitting underneath the stroke, and the fill, the shadow fill, is staying put, and it's acting as a shadow. It's sort of like a fake shadow in this case. And you probably are wondering, well, why couldn't we just apply like a drop shadow or something like that? And let me show you why. If we go under stroke and we go to FX and we go to stylize and we hit drop shadow, a drop shadow, while it does actually apply to everything underneath it, so it would hit that peach color. Here, if I decrease the blur enough, right, it is hitting the interior of the peach, but it's also hitting the exterior of the shapes underneath it. So that's why the drop shadow doesn't simply work, and we sort of have to take this super complicated workaround to get here. But I promise you, once you know what you're doing and you sort of know how to look and dissect certain things, it's actually not that difficult to have a good understanding of what's going on to create these effects. So the next thing that I want to take a look at is creating that 3D teal sort of cool effect. And to do that, I'm going to hit fill, new fill, and I'm going to drag this underneath. Come on. I'm going to drag, oh my goodness. I'm going to drag this fill layer underneath everything, and I'm going to add a new color swatch. Actually, we might not need to do that. I'm going to use the teal color swatch that we built originally. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to twirl this fill arrow down so that I can see the effects I'm going to be applying to it. And I'm going to hit 3D extrude and bevel. Now, under 3D extrude and bevel, what I want to do is I'm going to set all of these parameters to 0 so that everything sits exactly where it's supposed to be sitting. And I'm going to first set these guys to 5 degrees, just so that I can get a little bit of perspective happening. And I'm going to increase the extrude depth to 170 points. So 170 PT. And let's just click somewhere so that I can see if it's happening again. Okay, if you're like me and you like to click off of things a lot, you weren't producing any effects whatsoever, unfortunately. So if you guys were, great, hang out there for a second. I unfortunately have to come back really quickly and add in some extra things, so don't mind me. Extrude and bevel. Cool. So let's go 5, -5, 0, and we were going to do 170. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. There we go. And this looks pretty good. What I want to do, though, is not use plastic shading. Let's try using diffuse shading for once. And instead of black, I actually want to use a teal, almost like a bright teal color for the shading. And I'm going to just drag this guy all the way down to the bottom and see what that sort of gets us. Light intensity, yep, this seems fine. Blend steps seem fine. Caps is fine, bevel's fine. So let's leave all of this. And I know what you're looking at. You're like, well, that doesn't line up at all with what we sort of have to do here. And that's totally fine. What I am going to do, though, is I want to beef this up a little bit because you can see little gaps of breaks in between some of these things. So I want to create a offset path. And to do that, we're just going to, with our teal layer still selected, click on Effects, Path, Offset Path. And we can make this offset path -1.5 PT. Okay. Hit OK. It just sort of helps to beef things out a little bit. Cool. And finally, we're going to transform this so that it sits a little bit closer or a little bit more in line with what we need it to be. And for that, what I would like to do is under transform, we can leave the scale totally fine. This would just horizontally warp or vertically warp our type, and I don't want that. So under transform, I'm going to put this to like -7.5 PT for points. And then we're going to set this to 8 points, 8 PT. Hit OK. And it's a little bit off. So we kind of have to work on figuring our stuff out here. Let's do 0.01. That's a little bit much. 0.01? 0.001? Okay, no. What if we did negative? Nope. Okay. .9. That's a little bit on the too much. 5. I think I want like 4. Oh, come on. 6? 6 looks okay. And I need to sort of bring this, whoops, went a little bit too far to one side. Okay. Okay, let's leave it like that for now. Cool. And I just want to take a look at this offset path because I think that's where I'm running into some problems here in terms of beefing these shapes out. So instead of having it be 1/4 of an inch, let's bring it down, or 1/8 of an inch rather, let's bring it down to 0.25. That looks a lot fuller. And now let's go into transform and start figuring this guy out a little bit better. So instead of 6, let's make this 0.04, or maybe it needs to be 0.08 actually. Let's make this 9. Maybe this needs to be 1.3 or something. That's too much. 1.1. Or just 1. This really does just come down to fiddling about. I'm sorry if you guys might be getting a little bit frustrated just watching me mindlessly try and input values that may or may not be working. Yeah, that actually looks like it worked pretty good. 1.2 maybe? No, 0. Let's go with 0.9. 0.09. There we go. And no, that's still not quite what I'm looking for. All right. And we can squish this a little bit horizontally. I know, I'm sorry. I never should show you guys how to do stuff like that. Man, this is being tricky today, eh? Let's just leave this at -0.1 inches and 0.1 inches with 99% scale. I know it's so little discrepancies, but you never know. Let's come up to our offset path again, and let's set this to -0.3. No, sorry, I want it to be smaller. So 0.115. Oh, come on. 0.015. There we go. That looks a little bit better. And what we can do actually is we can double click on our type, Command A to highlight all, and kern it in just a little bit. This is going to help to get rid of some of the sort of spacing that you might see in between here. I'm just fiddling with some of our spacing and whatnot. There we go. Cool. Anyways, so let's just go and look back at our example, because this is really kind of baffling me why I can't seem to get the H. The H here doesn't line up perfectly. I know that, but it seems to line up a lot nicer than my H's over. Oh, maybe it is lining up about the same. I don't know. Some of our layers, you really just kind of have to figure out what works best for you. We could always sort of hide this stuff, ironically, by beefing out our stroke a little bit. I know it sounds terrible, but you kind of can. So it's not the end of the world. And then we can come back under here and transform, and we can just move this. We can just move this slightly by doing 1.5 or 1. Let's do like 1.2. Yeah. And then this is just gonna irritate me for the rest of the day. So, you know what? Don't mind me if you guys want to bounce ahead for a second and not deal with my neuroticness. That is totally fine. But I think, unfortunately, that's probably the best I'm going to be able to get it. For some reason, this really just doesn't want to hang out with me today. But the last thing that we can sort of do is we can go under effects and we can apply a drop shadow. And I want to show you guys how to apply a drop shadow in a way that does not make it seem really ugly. And the way to go about doing that, if you click on drop shadow, you'll notice right away that there's this sort of really tacky, super heavy one. And again, what we know from shadows is that we don't ever want it to be black. We just want it to be a darker version of the color it's sitting on top of. And especially when it comes to drop shadows, you need something that's not super heavy, and you also want it to be very wide. Right? Not 1 inch wide. Let's go 0.04. Or actually, we can do 0.09. Whoops. 0.9. Let's do that. Or 0.5. Yeah, 0.5 looks okay. And yeah, I'm happy with the offset. I'm cool with all of that. We can hit OK. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we've applied a bunch of our effects using the appearances panel, and we can come in, and again, this is all procedural stuff, so you can, change the type on each layer. You can make it say something different. So if you were designing cool 3D type for a poster or something, and an art director comes in and says, oh, like the copywriter actually changed what this has to say, not a big deal. It's not going to take you hours and hours to have to go back and fix. But that is just a quick overview of some of the stuff that you can do using the appearance panel, using 3D and extrude bevel to create a much more interesting and dynamic look for 3D type or 3D object than just sort of splashing up a random 3D object on screen and trying to call it a day. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys got something from it, and I'll see you in the next video.